Whiskey 9, 7 November, interrogative Alpha Bravo. Negative Alpha Bravo. And this is 7 November Golf. Roger, request you check your Romeo side. I'll go ahead and check my Tango side. 7 November Golf out. November 8-5, and 8-5, 7 November, say again. Roger, I said 7 November, go. Roger, I copied a while ago, 1 Charlie transmission that my thing used, November, go, 1 Charlie, hello. And 8-5, this is 7 November, Charlie. 8-5 right now. Now 1 Charlie, 7 November, go.
This is 1 Charlie, reference to your last, you're Brandon 158, extra 5 stars, 1200 between teams and local. Also request your unit take extra records to see if we can try to get Whiskey 9 and 8 for pause to the playground.
And this is 7 November, Roger, stand by.
Got that.
Got it? Alright. And all units, this is 7 November Golf. My unit Alpha, Echo, X-ray Alpha Alpha in there.
One Charlie, Alpha Bravo.
Hey, I never took a dip.
Whiskey 9, 7 November, interrogative Alpha Bravo. Whiskey 9, Yankee, 7 November Golf, over. Whiskey 9, 7 November, interrogative Alpha Bravo. Whiskey 9, Yankee, 7 November Golf, over. Whiskey 9, 7 November, interrogative Alpha Bravo. Negative Alpha Bravo. And this is 7 November Golf. Roger, request you check your Romeo side. I'll go ahead and check my Tango side. 7 November Golf out. November 8-5, and 8-5, 7 November, say again. Roger, I said 7 November, go. Roger, I copied 1 ago, 1 Charlie transmission
All right, we are live right now. Welcome to the channel. All channels, the CivDiv, Veterans Info Tap, David Piatek's channel on VA housing, education, and on Veterans Daily. I'm sure we're live somewhere else. I just don't know about it, but we're live. If it exists, we're on it. You're going to see our beautiful faces. We're also all three of us sick at the same time. No, we don't sleep together. It just kind of got around, I guess. But hey, Trump has been in office for about 72-ish hours now. We've had a chance to look at some nominations and the Senate hearings all throughout Congress. You know, Trump has signed many executive orders, and yes, a lot of them do affect veterans, and that's what we're going to talk about here over the next hour. And now I'm just going to rip the Band-Aid off type of guy. I'm just going to jump straight into this. There is a bad guy in Trump's cabinet, believe it or not. I don't care if you support him or not. There's a bad guy when it comes to being a veteran, and that, in my opinion, is Russell Vought. He's going to lead Office of Management and Budget, OMB, and he is a very firm believer that veterans who are rated at 30% or below should essentially just be erased, that their disabilities should not be paid, and that all veterans should have a means test. And this is a known fact. I'm not making that up. It sounds like I am, but I'm not. And when questioned this by Senator Blumenthal in the Senate, it did not go too well. Now, real quick before we panic, freak out, and everything goes on fire, keep in mind that that person's going to lead OMB, all right? And you want someone who's very critical of the budget in that position. And it's reassuring because while he may have those beliefs, the VA Secretary, Doug Collins, does not. Now, Jason, I know you watched the live stream. I know you restreamed it on your channel. I did the same thing. I watched the entire stream of Doug Collins. It was almost 3 hours. It was miserably long. But I'll tell you from my opinion, I think Doug Collins, after that hearing, is a great choice for the VA. all of his answers were spot on. It's what you want the VA secretary to answer. And I know this is a big ask, especially from politicians. But if Doug Collins can keep the same composure he had during the Senate hearing the next 4 years, or even after into the next administration, I think veterans will be in a really great spot. Those are my initial thoughts on Russell Vought. Not good in my opinion. Doug Collins, double good in my opinion. I want to know your thoughts on. And I know I just kind of threw a bomb right at your face.
Right. I agree. So one, Russell Vought, and so he is, again, Office of Management and Budget. So the OMB, and that is directly for the president. So it's in the executive, portion. Then we also have, keep in mind, we have the Congressional Budget Office as well, which is kind of like the congressional version of that same type of thing. And, the Congressional Budget Office has not historically been a friend to veterans with regard to benefits. So it's going to be, I think, a bit of a two-ended candle here, right? Burning on both sides with that same message. And I think that they are actually going to feed off of each other a little bit and get excited about that type of stuff. Not to mention when you have an administration that's saying that, look, we want to trim the fat. We want to cut things back. And for the greater good, yes, we get it, but let's leave veterans alone. Okay. Let's get that part straight. But I get it. I understand where they're coming from with that. And again, I'm going to take it with somewhat of a grain, anything that comes out of there with regard to slashing veteran benefits or what have you, hopefully, because at the end of the day, these types of messages come out consistently. Especially, I remember the last few years of the Congressional Budget Office have just been a nightmare. They talked about means testing. They talked about, slicing and carving off stuff. So having somebody like Doug Collins, I really do believe that he is a stand-up guy who is going to stand up against any of those types of suggestions, we'll call them. That hearing was very good. Everybody on the Senate committee, Veterans Affairs Committee, voted in favor for him, with the exception of one, which was Hiroko or whatever her name is from Hawaii. Yeah.
Don't even get me started on her.
Yeah. Whatever. And this is the political world, right? So, it's easy to say no when it's going to pass. So it's like, I'm just going to, say no because of my stance on X, and which is fine. Look, at the end of the day, we all three here know you can't please everybody. It's just, you're not. I read through my comments and look, I'm not pleasing everybody, right? I do my best, but it is what it is. I just do what I can. So think about it at a much larger level. You're not going to please everybody. So I think that Doug is going to do a great job. I think as we move into 2025, some of the things that he's going to tackle for the veteran side is going to be the EHR, right? The electronic health record. He's got to really focus in on the budget. Those are kind of the two big ones. 3 is going to be infrastructure within the VHA specifically, and then the coordination of that VHA, the Veterans Healthcare Administration, and providing healthcare services in conjunction with number 4, which is community care. Now, my question though, when we're talking about veterans benefits in general, we're looking, Dave, at massive things going on in the finance world, in the mortgage and real estate world. As we move into this new year a little further, we're in 2025. We're coming out of the worst time to try to sell a house, and we're fastly approaching the best time to sell a house, maybe or maybe not. What's happening, right? Everything is getting all jumbled up, and now we don't quite know exactly where we're going to land. And I'm not going to take the title from you because it's super long and has big words, and I'm just a Marine. So I'm going to let you go ahead and tell us a little bit about some of this stuff that's getting introduced and signed up and all that good stuff with regard to the real estate world, Dave.
Yeah, definitely. And just to touch on this, if they get rid of the 30% or lower rating for veterans, one, I mean, definitely affects their ability to purchase a property. And two, there are states that have tax breaks for veterans that have a 30% disability rating. So that's also what kind of complicate things. So in one of the executive orders that was signed a couple of days ago was for delivering emergency price relief for American families and defeating the cost of the living crisis, which, as we all know, costs have gone up significantly. And basically what it's trying to do is to lower the cost of housing and expand the housing supply. And they're also planning to look into price gouging, which, to be honest with you guys, like, I feel like that's what people are like, oh, inflation, prices have gone up. I feel like a lot of times they just raise the prices because that was the trend and they just haven't gone down, which I think is unfortunate. And another part of this, which I found interesting, was to eliminate counterproductive requirements that raise the cost of home appliances. I didn't even realize that was a thing. But where there is a big cost of home ownership, is going to be regulatory requirements, which they say account for about 25% of construction costs. And also, want people to realize when you're buying a new property, typically you're seeing anywhere from 15 to 40% profit margins for builders for construction. So they also take advantage of the fact that there's limited inventory that's out there. People want to purchase properties. And so you kind of go back to that struggle of, supply and demand. Right now, demand is high, supply is low. The Fed is announced they're going to keep dropping interest rates. So that's not going to directly benefit the veteran community around interest rates, because typically when the Fed drops the Fed funds rate, we see interest rates go up because people pull money out of the stock markets, out of bonds into the stock market. So it has to be attractive for people to go back in. So it's just kind of like that vicious circle. Plus, they're talking about deporting a lot of illegals, which make up a lot of contractors, right? So it also, are we going to see a price increase? But again, right now, it's partially, I think, artificial. Plus, if people are not paying taxes on the money they're getting paid, then why is construction costs so high? Right? That's just kind of like, again, I'm kind of like, why are we going in circles on that?
I got a question for you, David, and this one is so over my head, and I can't believe I'm about to just ask it without knowing anything. To my understanding, Trump did sign an executive order that allows or that incentivizes lawmakers, Congress, to essentially do something about this housing issue we're having. And to my understanding, a lot of that goes towards, for instance, I live in Northern Virginia. Amazon's building their headquarters up here. Everyone's been talking about it for years. I want to blow my brains out every time someone says Amazon, okay? But that means that these huge corporations are buying houses. And listen, if you're a veteran using the VA home loan, or you're Joe Schmo using some other conventional loan, you're not going to compete with Amazon. Right now, there's nothing that the president can do to stop that completely. But to my understanding, he's telling lawmakers and saying, hey, this is a problem. Are there any regulations that we can use to kind of fix this single family home crisis of corporations buying homes? That is my elementary understanding. Can you explain that to me? Like, I am a Marine, right, who can't say big words.
No, it's all good. So listen, I think it's a big issue both for companies coming in and buying single family homes, but you also have foreign governments that are coming in and buying a lot of our supply. The challenge with that is that private companies that own these single family homes, if we were to come in and say, listen, we are the United States, we are going to force you to sell them, it would kind of be like a communist country in a way. Right. So, I don't know what they're going to be able to do as far as restricting who can purchase within the United States or how companies can purchase them. But that's why they're trying to figure out, how do we lower the cost of construction? The challenge with that, no matter how much you drive the price of, let's say, construction material down, because demand is so high, all that's going to happen is builders are going to eat that up. I don't know if you guys remember, there was in the last presidential the election, they were talking about doing a $25,000 first-time homebuyer grant. And I got a lot of builders that I know, and they just laughed. They're like, "We're just going to increase our prices by 25,000, right?" Like, not to be negative, but like that's just the reality of it, just because of how many people want to get into it. And if they drop interest rates, the challenge is going to be is that once again, the divide is going to be bigger because people that have been on the sidelines are going to jump in, and that's going to negate any savings with rates going up by competition.
Right.
So I'm not sure how they're going to be able to control the cost, because I feel like it shouldn't even be a political issue. It's a supply and demand issue.
Right.
So,
well,
and
I think that what happens though is this, it actually really boils down to the local elected officials, your county elected officials, your city elected officials, because they are the ones putting in, say, like slow growth initiatives, that type of stuff. They're not allowing these building permits to happen. They're not allowing mass production of homes. So therefore they're controlling the supply, keeping it suppressed. Meanwhile, the demand is there, driving the prices up. So I think it's a combination of several things. And I think from the federal level, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to do something that's impactful with regard to housing prices at a national scale. The only thing you could probably do is one, incentivize the localities, right? Whether it's a city, a county, whatever, to incentivize them in some way to reduce their regulatory aspects, reduce their fees, their costs, whatever, and supplement that with federal funds, right? And then also maybe incentivize them to have a better balance when it comes to supply and demand. It's hard though, right? I mean, it's kind of like the VA with the healthcare facilities and going, okay, well, where do we think veterans are going to be 10 years from now?
Yeah.
Are they all moving? Do we need to start building this now? You can't build a master PUD, planned unit development. You can't build a master plan unit development in 1 year based on the population that's today. You got to think, what's it going to look like 6 years from now, 10 years from now? And then you start building it out. So, what are your thoughts on the local level, David, as far as the supply and demand issue, I think?
Yeah. So, to touch on that's a great point, Jason, is that it really comes down to a local level. And the partnerships I've seen between contractors and cities where they basically do subsidize the housing costs to build these units. One, people have to qualify for them, right? So you have to be you have to fit that box to be able to purchase in it. And normally they come with restrictions that you can only appreciate your property so much every year. They will also restrict on how much, when you sell the property, how much equity actually goes to the owner of the property. So it's not really free exchange of real estate. It's somewhat controlled in that perspective. But that's why, I did a video on purchasing land. It's one way that you can get into home ownership, at least early on, to be able to purchase land over time, pay it off, and then leverage that to do a construction loan and build your dream home versus in Arlington, Virginia, where the average home is probably $1.5 million. 30 years ago, it was farmland. So again, but it also takes some visionary to do that. But definitely, that's why in certain areas it is very affordable. Where the average starter home now is about $200,000, but you really have to look for that. And I have not seen a house in a major city that's $200,000.
Right. Yeah.
I do want to chime in here real quick. So first off, I have no idea who's from what channel, but if it helps one of it helps all of us. So thank you. We appreciate that. Kirby, new member, welcome to the team here. Richmond Veterans Help, welcome. Thank you for being a member. We appreciate that. Mike Huss, I'm just going to say it like that. Hopefully I pronounced it right. Gina Lagarce, welcome. Then we have a super chat. It says Trump's answer to $825.5 billion. That's a lot of money, by the way. Being wasted is to get rid of telework and hiring freezes. Telework had nothing to do with that, but got the blame. So that directly affects me because I am a federal employee, at least for right now. And there is a mandatory go back to work thing happening, which sucks, right? But it goes into leasing that building, and I think that's what Jason was getting. It's the same issue with the VA, right? Leasing these buildings, all that costs money. Now with employees, you're looking at benefits and all that stuff. And I do want to go back to, you mentioned something, Jason, and I don't want to go too far before we forget it, is during the Senate hearing for Doug Collins, and I know we're getting away from VA housing right now, but the entire Senate hearing, like 99%, was all budgetary VHA focused.
Mhm.
Almost all of it. It was very little disability. Very, very
Right.
little. What that tells me is, hey, I think disability is safe. I think the priorities are hardcore budget, VHA, staffing, looking at where are we going to put VHA facilities. If we're going to expand VHA, if we're going to double down on community care, that's probably what's going to happen in my opinion, as I
Right.
see it. And so I just see everyone commenting in the chat, you know, my genuine thoughts on VA disability. I think disability is safe, right? Russell Watson, OMB, keep him over there. Just like how you have Bobby Kennedy disagrees with Trump almost on everything, but he's gonna be talking about energy. Keep him over there. Keep Russell Vaught over there. We want Doug Collins. Leave us alone. That's what we want, right? And I'm trying to comfort the chat now because I see
Right.
crazy comments on disability on that one. But okay, sorry. Thank you for the members. Thank you for the super chat, Jason. What do you got?
Yeah, you know, one of the things that that he did talk about, and it might have been missed by some folks because it was just a quick little blurb, and I'm not going to nail down the quote, but the real thing here is when it comes to VHA and the adding of community care, he's saying basically he's not taking away from VHA. All those facilities, right, still going to be happening, all that stuff. Make the community care aspect a little more robust. But one of the things that he mentioned in there, Clay, and I don't know if you saw it or heard it or not, was when he mentioned the joint partnership with the civilian sector, right? So there's a clinic, there's a hospital, whatever, got empty space in that community. Let's fill that with VA employees. And maybe it's a 25-75 split. 25% is VA employees seeing veterans, right? That's a great, I think, kind of hybrid version of getting the care out there. At the end of the day, and this message has now transcended both administrations, which is we need to take care of veterans where they are. Literally, why make them drive 2 hours, right? If you can allow them to be taken care of via community care or at a joint facility, and why not do more DOD joint facilities, right? There was also some conversations on making that transition, which everybody watching this and all of us here can absolutely agree that the handoff between DOD and VA really doesn't even exist, right?
No, it doesn't.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's at least there's a couple things now that are there, but I mean, it's still nowhere where it needs to be. Any thoughts you want to throw out there?
I do. I actually want your thoughts on something too, Jason. One of the things I actually disagreed with Doug Collins on, he had mentioned he wants appointed positions between the VA and the Senate offices to include HVAC, because he had said multiple times, like, the people that the Senate and the House represent shouldn't be calling them with problems with the VA. And so Doug Collins was talking about putting people in the Senate offices and House offices to kind of alleviate that. And I actually disagree with that. And I really want your thoughts, because in my mind, I think that leaves an avenue to politicize the VA, right? I think the VA in that aspect would be way too political, and to where someone, you know, in my state, I'm going to really pressure the VA to do this in my state because of X, Y, Z, versus instead of just looking at a nation. I forgot what he exactly said, so I don't want to quote him, but he did mention having representatives from the VA do this in between handshake of the House and the Senate. So we wouldn't have to call our senators when there's a problem. But the issue is, well, who else are we going to call, big dog?
Right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. It's just something that he did say that I did disagree with. I was like, that looks a little bit too party-handed to me, in my opinion, right? Because let's say you got 10 people, you're going to split it up 5 and 5. Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree with you. I think that no, that should be a resource for folks always, and in fact, it should be bolstered up from the congressional side of the House. In fact, I would go a step further and say any staffer at any, we'll leave the Senate out of it, just because there's only 2 in the state, right? So we'll focus on House side. So I would go this far and say that really any staffer who is in working for that Congress member to handle VA as the department, because they get assigned who they have to work with and help folks with, that they must go get accredited by the VA so they can have some sort of understanding of how all of that stuff works. Not that they're going to file claims, but at least that they understand and have the information that they need to know, like, to ask the right questions and to be able to follow the bouncing ball, right? So it's not much of a time investment, and it would be free because it's the VA, right? So they could get that done for free and at very little a time investment. And I think that would actually be a better resource for veterans and their family members and survivors, all the people that hit the roadblock, and to have a team within the VA that handles those congressional inquiries, that actually really handles those congressional inquiries, instead of, here's the template letter, we'll look into it, thank you very much, kick rocks. So anyway, that's my thought on that there, Clay.
Well, I do have one more thing. It came to mind this morning, right? I saw a LinkedIn post, looked it up. This is on the state level in South Dakota, which of all states, I can't believe I would ever mention South Dakota in my life ever. But hey, it's 1 of 50, right? So South Dakota has legislation on their state floor to cut the funding. 2 pieces of legislation. 1, to cut funding for VSOs. And I already know your answer on that one. And 2 is, so right now in South Dakota, having county VSOs is not optional. The county must have VSOs. And so funding is allocated for that. This legislation would rid the requirement and make it optional. And I already know your answer on this, but I learned about it this morning. South Dakota is the only state I know of that is doing that. I'm going to start looking this up in other states as well. What are your thoughts on old South Dakota cutting funding for VSOs and getting rid of the mandatory requirement for counties to staff VSOs? I already know the answer, but I just want to hear it.
Right. Okay. So 1, it's stupid. And so let's put this on as a political hat for a minute, and not because it's the right thing to do. Okay. Because there's two versions, right? One version is, look, it's for veterans. It's for disabled veterans and spouses and surviving spouses and dependents. So it's a resource for those people who reside in your state. It's the right thing to do. Okay. Let's slide that over there for a minute, because not everything that's political is done because it's the right thing to do, right? There's a lot of drivers behind it. And if you look at, and I was going to pull up the numbers real quick. I will before we get off of this, though, because now I'm curious. If you look at the top 3 veteran populated states, and this is something that I've talked about before, why do states offer VA, their own state veterans benefits, right? Like the tax exemption, the hunting licenses, the parks, the whatever it is, right? The motor vehicle registration waiver. Why do they offer these benefits, right? Is it really because it's the right thing to do? Well, sure, but it's because veterans are bringing in billions of dollars into the states every single year from VA disability compensation. So South Dakota, from just a what's financially smart to do, is actually invest in VSOs, get your VSOs to be proactive and get out there and work with the veteran community, get them in, make sure that they're rated appropriately, help them get their ratings increased or help them file their first rating, dispel the myths out there with regard to VA benefits, and help these people, in addition to surviving spouses, which is just a horrible group that is completely forgotten in the VA world, and help them get the compensation that they've earned, right? As a veteran or a surviving spouse, right? Through dependency indemnity compensation. And in turn, that money will come into your state and be spent in your state. I'll tell you, the one thing that veterans are really good at is not saving their money. They're going to spend it and they're going to get taxed on it in the state. So from that perspective, the states understand this and they want to keep veterans in their state. So they provide these other little benefits and these resources to keep that cog moving. Now, I got a question for David because I was rambling and
we went off there. Sorry, David.
No, but I like it. It's good. We need to get the information out there.
Right? I know you don't have a crystal ball, David. I get it. But with the flavor that you have, kind of just the momentum of things, and I know you talked about the FET, and I need you to really dive in on this a little bit as you kind of digested it from the first time you mentioned it. But for those that are just watching now, we're anticipating, according to what you said, we're anticipating that the Fed will continue to drop the rate. Now, we don't know. Does that mean just 1 time, 2 times, 3 times? Does it mean a quarter? Does it mean a half? You know, we don't really know. But we're going to see some downward movement. And what you said was, that's not necessarily going to translate into, oh, great, everybody's going to get a 3% interest rate again, right? That ship has sailed. And I want to get your take on, I guess, and you've talked about this before, so I'm going to try to lead you into this, is if somebody is thinking about buying, is there this magical thing they should be waiting for? Or what should they do if they don't own today with all these things happening? What's your advice?
Great question. So this is the challenge, I think, for a lot of people, is that I don't have a crystal ball. Neither of you have a crystal ball. But if there's somebody out there that has this magical crystal ball that says, hey, in 11 months and 3 days, interest rates are going to be this, and then the housing demand is going to be this, and it's going to be the best time to get in, you're never going to get into home ownership. And I, watched a couple YouTube channels here recently, looking at all the different aspects that they're talking about housing, and a lot of the comments I see, and also from talking with a lot of people, is that they say that they wish they would have bought when home prices were cheaper because it was a lot more affordable. Now, I'll give you guys some easy stats when it comes to that. In 2020, so last year, average home price was $427. That's up from $402,000 12 months ago. And in 2020, the average home price was $296. Okay. It's all about if you can afford it today. That's all that counts. So even if you bought 16 years ago, which technically was the worst time you could ever buy, right? The market's crashed completely. You would still be doing extremely well right now if you held on to that property. I just want you to think about that the entire meltdown of the world happened in 2008, 2009 over mortgage-backed securities. Even if you bought at that time, you would be well above what you purchased that property for today if you kept that property. So it's all about, can you afford it today, and looking at your financial picture and controlling your finances to be able to put yourself in the best position. And Jason, you made a good point. There's a bill right now they're trying to pass around veteran awareness to the VA home loan, right? And just benefits in general, because veterans, let's say from a VA home loan perspective, only 13% of veterans use the VA home loan. And I think 46% of surviving spouses don't know that they have benefits like indemnity compensation. I'll give you guys a quick example. A couple months ago, I was doing something with a nonprofit. We had a lady come in. Husband passed away 8 years ago from a service-connected disability. He was 100%. For the last 8 years, she hasn't collected indemnity compensation, and she was paying real estate taxes, and she didn't remarry, so she qualified for everything. So then she applied with the VA. We got them connected, and then she was able to get a portion of that money back paid. But like those are the things, people leave money on the table by not knowing like what access they have. But they have a bill right now on the table to bring more awareness.
Right. Yeah, and I think that that's an important aspect. Now, one other question for you, just for the sake of explaining the difference. When we hear VA loan, a lot of people think the VA is doing a loan for you. Can you explain real quick how that doesn't really work and how lenders differ? Right. So it's not, you're walking into a Baskin Robbins all of a sudden, right? So you can just explain that real quick. That'd be great.
Yeah, definitely. So one misconception from veterans is like, oh, the VA denied my loan or the VA said this. The VA doesn't really say anything. They set guidelines and they guarantee the VA home loan, right? Lenders are the ones that do them. The only time the VA does the loans is if you do a specially adapted grant, or you use the NATO program, which is a Native American direct loan, and you're buying on like federal reservation land. Then the VA steps in, which, by the way, those rates are by the VA, not by us. They're 2.5%, and they expire in the early March. So if you want to take advantage of that, you can. And then same thing with like VASP. So lenders differ because the VA sets a very, very loose requirements for veterans to be homeowners. No minimum credit scores. They allow for what's called residual income. So a lot of lenders will put overlays onto what the VA loan allows them to do. So a lot of times veterans will reach out and say, hey, I was denied 3 times. Like I just had someone yesterday do that. And then they're like, well, that's because the lender didn't understand how to review your VA disability compensation. They didn't understand how to factor in your VA home loans into your qualification. And then they were actually able to qualify and go under contract on a property. That's why, too, on the flip side, if you're being marketed to constantly, you are paying for that service when you work with those people, right? I can't stress that enough. We did a video on that not too long ago. Over 416,000 veterans used the VA home loan last year, but on average paid $8,000 in over like $8,000 in additional, like I feel like junk fees for using the VA loan when you don't have to be charged those fees. I see, guys, too many times people save money and only to have their savings wiped out because they didn't do a little bit of research.
Right. Yeah. You're on mute.
I am on mute. Okay, I said I'm going to try something and hopefully it works. Turns out it worked. All right, so I want to zoom in just a little bit more here so the viewer can see. Let's try one more. This is the bill that David had just talked about. It's from Tim Sheehy. You guys know that jingle that's like sheehy.com. Okay, that's this guy. Every time I hear his name, whatever. Anyways, I just did that on live. But that's him. He's a Republican. Then you see Democrat, meaning it's bipartisan, which is how veteran issues should be. So off the bat, this is good. And then we say, despite these benefits, it's a VA home loan. Only 13% of veterans access the VA home loan program. And what this bill would do, it's a one-pager. I'll go ahead and link this down below in the chat, but it's right here. This bill would add a disclosure to the standard mortgage pre-qualification application, URLA. I'm sure David knows what that is. I don't. To inform veterans that they may qualify for a VA home loan. In 2021, the application was updated to include a section on military service information, and this bill would only add an additional line about VA home loan to that section. David, this is so far above my head here. Why does having a one-liner talking about the VA home loan on this URLA form, how would that actually bring awareness? I don't understand that, to be honest with you. I read it and I'm like, okay.
Yes, so they already have something there that helps you identify. And basically what it is that they don't want veterans to be steered away from their benefits, because a lot of veterans do get steered away. But that's part of like this whole initiative into home ownership of what we've been talking, or at least from my section, right? Because you guys are talking about the policy and disability. But from my end, they're really trying to bring awareness so veterans utilize the program a lot more, because again, lots of misconceptions and veterans get steered away from these benefits that they have. So yeah, I'm not sure how that would relate exactly to like the VA disability component to it. But that's the same thing. Like you have a lot of VSOs or different bad actors out there in the veteran space that are telling veterans to file one way when they actually should be filing a different way, or veterans not educating themselves and going in blind and then disqualifying themselves from something they should be qualified for. So it's kind of like, yeah, so it's all about the education piece to it.
I'm glad you brought that up because I see so many veterans, so many that say, hey, I was denied migraines primary. I want to do a migraine secondary claim. I'm going to submit migraine secondary. I'm like, hold up. It has to be a supplemental claim. Secondary or not, I don't care. It has to be a supplemental. And I assume that level of, I don't want to say ignorance because that's a very strong word, but you don't know what you don't know, right? And I can tell you that I didn't know about the VA home loan. The only reason I even used it is because our realtor was like, hey, you have the VA home loan. I was like, sick, nice, you know? And I assume there's a lot of veterans that have that same mindset too. You know, you don't know what you don't know. And I definitely wouldn't be able to live in the house I live in now if I did not use the VA home loan for sure. That's all I got.
Yeah, so that's definitely why it's a huge benefit with everything that's going on, prices and everything else in that perspective.
Yeah.
Right. You know, I wanted to throw out a little information on VASP. I did see, I saw a little comment and I heard it in the dialogue here. So I wanted to just throw out VASP is the Veterans Affairs Servicing Purchase Program. And what this is this is the result of a disaster within the VA. The VA had a COVID forbearance, essentially, that they were allowing lenders to allow veterans to not make payments on their mortgages while they went through whatever was happening in their life. They lost their job, whatever it is, certain circumstances allowed them to be entered into this COVID forbearance. And the idea is that after X number of months, let's say you're qualified for 12 months of don't make a payment, they'll add those 12 months to the end of your loan. Well, the VA pulled the rug out from under everybody toward the end of it. And people who were partway through weren't able to actually get that missed payments put to the end of their loan. So they still owed that money, which subsequently led to foreclosures for some folks, foreclosure process, all of that type of stuff. Sadly, some people did get foreclosed on, lost their home. Some people sold their home. Some people maybe went into a loan modification and took a higher interest rate with higher payments just to save their home. Anyway, months went by. They developed VASP, Veterans Affairs Servicing Purchase Program. And according to the VA, they're assuming that it was somewhere around 40,000-ish veterans that could have been impacted, and they could potentially help with a 2.5% interest rate over the remaining term. The VA essentially becomes the servicer and of the loan at that point. And I don't know who you make your payments to, but I'm just throwing it out there for folks that if any of that sounds like a situation you were in or are in, reach out to the VA and ask them about VASP, and they can drive you to the right person or phone number or what have you to see if this is something that you could potentially qualify for. Just want to throw that out there. A question for you, David, is when we look to now, when we talk about mortgages, it's all over the board. It could be a refinance. It could be a purchase. It could be a cash out refinance. It could be I'm buying a multi-unit property. It could be I'm leaving my current property. I'm going to turn it into a rental and I'm going to go buy another home that's bigger, badder, better. And all of these could be VA loans, which is just crazy to me. One of the things that are always concerning, or that is always concerning for folks, is money out of my pocket, right? How much money do I need to save up, not just for down payment, but also for closing costs? One of the biggest fees out there is the VA funding fee. I'd love for you to just touch on the VA funding fee, and I'd love for you to touch on kind of a closing costs-ish, high-level overview, just so people are aware.
For sure. Yeah. So with the VA funding fee, it's the only fee that gets rolled into the mortgage. Now, if you have a 10% or higher disability rating, you don't pay that funding fee. That's why also another big benefit of the 10% or more So if, back to our earlier conversation, if they change that to 30 or less, you don't get anything. Does that mean at 40 or higher, they would have to change that? So there's a lot of implications around that. And for folks, it's about, on average, it's about 2 to 3% of a purchase price to buy across the country, right? So you can ask for seller credits because lenders, sellers can give that to you. And really, like, the winter time is the best time to purchase if you're looking for that. Sorry, guys. This cold is not going away. So yeah, it's just going to really depend on how that makeup is and where you're buying in the country. But I have a question for you guys, because I've been seeing and talking with the VA a lot, just because we do a lot of presentations with them. And I know that the hiring freeze that's happening right now, they put in a piece, I guess, even firing or not firing, rescinding offers from people that were supposed to be starting February 8th and on. Do you guys see from like a, people's waiting times for the VA disability to be processed? Do you guys think you're going to start seeing a delay in that?
So this is something that Doug Collins was asked. I mean, he did give an answer. I'll paraphrase his answer, but people should really go check out what he says just to get it from the source. Pretty much, to my understanding, at least to what has been preached to us during the Senate hearing, is that the hiring freeze in no way, shape, or form affects veterans receiving benefits. And that was very point blank, straightforward. Now, is that the case? I don't know. I guess we'll find that out.
Right.
Also, to my understanding, I do know that I'm a federal employee. Hiring freezes happen all the time, multiple times a year for various agencies for various reasons. I assume this is when the torches pass off and you have a new cabinet coming in. There's going to be a firing freeze for various departments, the VA probably being one of them, right? That's my assumption, but that's what Doug Collins said about that. Yeah, that's all I got.
Right. Yeah. When it comes to the freezes, and yes, you're right. They did put in essentially exemptions for 300,000+ employees as being mandatory. When you're looking at these types of things, oftentimes, if it has to do with healthcare, you can basically say, yeah, we're exempt from that because of the services that we provide, and we need to stay on top of this stuff because it's life and limb type of situations here. So that's one thing. And my take on that, and what I would argue if I was running the VA, would be all of my VBA employees that are involved with awarding claims are opening the doorway to VA healthcare. So they're just as important. In fact, if we don't get these claims through and we don't get these people approved for their VA benefits on the compensation side, that door to healthcare could be closed for them. And now what? Not on my watch. Sorry, all of my leave me alone. And this is why, right? And that would be the hill that I would stand on if I had to go to whoever to fight that. I know that a letter went out by the acting VA secretary until Doug Collins is fully in office there. But yeah, 308,000 are exempted, and yeah, we'll see what happens. I hope we don't see any sort of adverse effects, and if we do, I expect some loud voices from the veteran community, the VSOs, and the VA directly. Now, it's also a weird thing. It's also a weird thing when it comes to the political world, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's hard for the VA secretary to quote unquote lobby for themselves and what they want to get done. It's kind of this weird, it's a weird dynamic, right? Behind closed doors, there can be those conversations, yeah, in certain circumstances, but they can't run out and go, hey, I need everybody to say that we want to do this. It's a weird environment, right? So we, at the end of the day, we can't rely on anybody to do it for us, right? We need to be that loud constituency.
Yeah, I got something for you, David. First, we have a super chat from rawest nanny diva ever. She's from my hometown. I'm never gonna forget that name. So I know you're from Louisville, Kentucky, and it's not a question. I'm gonna turn her super chat into a question. It says, never ever use my home loan. I need help with that. I pay $1,600 a month the past 8 years. Embarrassing. I assume that's for rent, which does suck.
Yeah.
Now Louisville is an area where there is affordable housing. Now it depends on where you want to live. Everyone knows the East End. If you don't know, David, the East End, so you have Louisville. The further away you get from Louisville on the east side is towards Lexington. That's good houses. Literally everywhere else is poop. Okay.
Yeah. It's a matter of opinion.
Affordable housing.
Right. Good save, David. Good save. No redlining. No redlining. None of that happening.
How would you consult rawest nanny diva ever? And how could you help her? And real quick, she also says, I'm an RN and got the freeze email. I assume you mean you work for the VA as that. So thank you.
We're going to be hired by the VA. Well,
so she obviously has a career in the healthcare field. We know healthcare workers make good money, especially RNs with the level of certifications that they have. So what is your advice to her in home ownership in Louisville, Kentucky, the one and only?
They got great bourbon. I stop by there when I travel and pick up bourbon at the stores there. So, but I would just say like the easiest thing to do is really just if you're interested, schedule a call with me in the description. Happy to walk you through that process. Cause like, for a lot of veterans, especially in your areas where, $1,600 a month is kind of like that starter home for a lot of people, right? You're talking probably around roughly a $200 to $250 price point property. So it's definitely achievable to be able to get into home ownership at that price with today's market for sure.
All right, now
I appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. And rawest nanny diva ever. I'm trying to say your name every time I read that. Thank you very much. We definitely appreciate that. I have a hard stop at 7, which is in 9 minutes, and I kind of wanted to hand you the floor, David, and talk about. We've done multiple streams with you. We've both done multiple videos with you here on Veterans Daily, on our own channel, CivDiv and Veterans Info Tap. You have 8 minutes to go. What is it that you do for veterans? I get that question all the time, right? Like, why do you work with David? What does he do for us? So I kind of just want to give you the floor and just say, hey, what is it that you do for veterans?
So what is it that I do? So I am a loan officer. I do help veterans utilize the VA home loan. I'm a service member myself. Been serving for the last 16 years in the Guard. So I got a couple more years to retirement. Can't wait. And the reason I did the channel is because out of my own frustration of trying to use the VA home loan. I was in the lending now for forever, but just never really focused in on the veteran space. Joined the military later in life, and just seeing like guys in my unit just get wrong information. I was like, this has got to stop. Like, I got to do something about that. So, I had the idea of creating the YouTube channel, which is really just education based, right? Like, give you as much info as you can absorb about the product. And then, you can leverage it, use it how you want to, think about it, let it marinate, and then reach out when it's time. So we've been blessed in a way to help a lot of veterans in the community become homeowners because of that. And if they can't buy today, setting them up for success down the line. Really, that's kind of been the most important aspect, because too much misinformation is out there, right? Even if you're like filing for VA disability, it's the same thing. Like, that's how I came across you guys, trying to find my benefits. And I know, Clay, you just did like a post like, hey, if anybody is interested in sharing some videos on and I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to reach out to Clay and see what's up. Like,
yeah, and we did it. We did do that.
Literally, that's it. And I'm like, hey, this is kind of what I do. Because a lot of times, for veterans, it's about not one aspect. Like, I want VA disability. Okay, well, that's one thing. Well, do you understand what's happening in the landscape of policy? Right, Jason, you're coming in explaining how that works. You have disability. You're understanding what the changes are. We need to get involved, right? We need to get, as veterans, if we sit on the sidelines, guess what? Number one, our population is drastically reducing over the next 30 years. Veterans are going to be like a couple million, like from 20-some million to a couple million veterans are going to be left in the next 30 years. So if we don't stay, aware of the benefits that we have, how do we pass on generational wealth, which is also going to be with real estate. And that's why I just have such a passion for it, just because, I'm first generation born here. Like we didn't have this opportunity back home.
Yeah, joke's on you. We're all going to be veterans because World War III is going to happen, and
Yeah.
my mom's going to be a veteran. My grandma's going to be a veteran. Everyone is. Dude,
Everyone's gonna
don't
be.
worry about that. There's going to be no shortage. No, you make an absolute solid point, and we have another super chat from Ross Nanny Diva Ever. I can't not pull these up. So seriously, way too much. Thank you. I definitely appreciate that. Says you always forget me. I'm Stacy. What up, Stacy? No, I've been trying to get in the VA for years. I teach a program at Fairdale. Oh, okay, because you had mentioned that you're an RN. All right, I just assumed you work for the VA. Yeah, but yeah, it's things that I'm so glad you brought that up because I remember I was trying to grow the channel and have other creators on the channel, which did work. I had my friend Jay there, not Jay as in Jason, the other one. He was darker in pigment. Okay. And so I had my friend help me. I had David was uploading videos to the channel. And then just through the years, now we have this amazing partnership. And I assume it's beneficial to you. And I wouldn't, just like I wouldn't tell my son to do something I wouldn't do, I wouldn't tell you to do something either. I think a few weeks ago, I sent David my mortgage statement and was like, dude, I have no idea what any of this is. I just kind of bought the house because I could. Okay. Help me. Right. And we went through the numbers and David didn't charge me a single penny for that. And he's not going to charge you a single penny for that. And so if you hit him up, his contact information, his contact information is down below. And then if you want to get into home ownership, you can go with these mega companies, and I won't name them for legal reasons.
Yeah.
You can go with these mega companies that's going to charge you advertising fees and all these other fees, or you can go with a veteran like David, who's also still in the National Guard, who genuinely has your back. So, you know, there's a reason we work with David. That's why we're big fans of living below your means.
Not at your bald head. That's what I thought you were going with, the bald head.
Yes, and of all three of us, he has the least hair, right?
That is a fact. And you know what? I'll leave you guys with this on that. So, Clay, yeah, I'm gonna use you as a good example because you inspired myself when we were talking. So, you know, if you don't mind, I'll kind of share Clay
you can share whatever we talked about except for dollar figures.
So Clay basically reached out on a very positive, like in a very good question of, hey, how do I pay off my mortgage faster? Right. And we went through the numbers and it wasn't actually that much to go from a 30-year mortgage to a 15-year mortgage payment. But the amount of savings that you have from that is astronomical. And so, you know, I'm working with Jay, you know, with Clay on this, and I just bought my place a year and a month ago. And I was like, and I never even have time to look at my own stuff. I'm like, just pay the bills. I got to get rolling on my videos and everything else in life. And I was like, you know what? So while I'm on the phone with him, I changed my mortgage payment to a 15-year. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to change it because of the amount of money that you'd be, I was going to save was just astronomical. So it's just like, it's the small tips that save you money on a day in, day out basis. And, you know, for me, it's how do I save people money? How do I get them to something they want to be? And on your guys' end, it's how do we get the benefits that veterans deserve, but they don't know how to like really go through that process and access them. So like, that's kind of like where the rubber hits the road between us to be able to actually do these videos and get information out to just fellow veterans.
Yeah, that's all I got. Jason, do you want to lead us out? And I do have a question for you from Nickda. Says, where's the rooster? And I've asked myself this too, because I usually hear him a lot when we do Veterans Day daily content. I haven't heard him the last few days. Is he alive? Can you confirm this?
Yeah, he is alive. He is alive. He's a little ninja. You know, sometimes he'll get cocky, and try to sneak up behind me and jump on me, man. He's a little bit, I'm willing to say aggressive on this, and he would be dinner except for too many people like him because they don't have to live with him. So so he's still alive. He's just, I think he's asleep actually right now. So lucky for me, I get some quietness. So one thing I did want to, that I promised I'd throw out there is the numbers for South Dakota. And I'm not going to go through all the numbers, but I believe it was South Dakota that you mentioned, Clay, was the one that was, okay. So for those that weren't on earlier, South Dakota is proposing to eliminate funding or eliminate the requirement of having state paid VSOs at all of their counties, right? So essentially making it a optional thing. VSO, not Veteran Service Organization, VSO, Veteran Service Officer, with Veteran Service representatives that might be working with them in the more dense areas. So that's not a good thing. And I just said I'd throw out the numbers here. The numbers real quick for South Dakota. There's 20,188 veterans as of the end of 2022. The estimated total amount paid monthly for disability compensation, $28,418,480. That is an annual amount of disability compensation at $341 million, $21,765. So it's a lot of money that they're basically saying, you know, thanks for your money. We're not going to help you do any more of that. So with that, thank you guys so much for watching. We really appreciate every single one of you. Hit the thumbs up, subscribe to any channel. All three would be great. And we appreciate you. Have a great one. And remember, if we don't take care of each other, something went wrong.